She gave a stranger shelter in the middle of a storm, wet, cold, and helpless. The next morning, that same stranger watched her get humiliated and fired in front of a room full of people who said nothing. But he didn't forget her kindness, and when he returned, he didn't come back as a man with car trouble. He came back as the man who owned everything. Denise Carter hated the rain. It wasn't just the cold or how it soaked through her worn sneakers. It was how it always came on the worst nights, like the world wanted to see how far it could push her. Tonight, Eastwood was drowning. The wind howled between buildings, ripping at umbrellas and spirits alike. Denise had just finished a double shift at the diner, her gray uniform stained with grease, her back aching. She pulled her old white pickup onto the shoulder of an empty road, blinking through foggy glass. That's when she saw it. A luxury black sedan, steam curling from under the hood like a ghost, flashers blinking, alone. Standing beside it, an old white man in a suit, soaked and shivering, holding his phone in the air like it might catch a miracle. Denise slowed. For a second, she almost kept driving. She'd been warned 100 times. Don't stop for strangers, especially not in storms. But the man looked like somebody's granddad lost on the wrong side of town. His eyes met hers for a moment. Vulnerable. Human. She rolled down the window, rain slicing through sideways. "You good out here?" He blinked through the downpour. Car died, no tow trucks, no signal. Bad turn somewhere. Denise hesitated, then reached across and unlocked the door. "Come on, you'll freeze." He studied her. Black woman, maybe mid-20s, soaked and exhausted behind the wheel of a dying truck. Then, quietly, he climbed in. The heater coughed but warmed enough to keep his hands from shaking. They didn't talk much. She introduced herself. He said his name was Henry. That was it. She drove through broken neighborhoods and forgotten streets until they reached her apartment. A single-room flat with a leaking radiator and one thin blanket. She gave it to him without a word, along with a mug of instant soup. "You didn't have to," he said, voice low. Denise shrugged, pouring herself a glass of tap water. Nobody's built to survive alone. He smiled faintly before curling up on her worn couch. She watched the rain until sleep came. By morning, he was gone. Couch folded neat, blanket stacked. A note sat on the table. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." Denise tucked it into her apron pocket and headed to work, soaked again. She didn't know that note would be the only thing keeping her steady in the hours to come, because that same diner, her only lifeline, was about to spit her out in front of a full room, like she meant nothing at all. The diner smelled like burnt bacon and bitter coffee. Denise pushed open the glass door, 10 minutes late and dripping from the rain. Her hair clung to her face, apron already damp before she tied it. She hoped to slip in quietly, maybe grab a towel from the back. No chance. "Look who finally decided to show up," barked Steve Harlow, the manager, loud enough for every customer to hear. His sleeves were rolled up like always, a smirk playing at his lips as he slammed the ticket pad on the counter. Denise froze. Conversations dimmed. Even the fryer seemed to stop bubbling. She looked down. Quiet. "I'm sorry, sir," she began. "Save it," he snapped. "Owner's coming in today, Carter. You know that. And you show up dripping like a stray dog. You think good intentions pay rent?" A few heads turned. The young cook stared at the grill, motionless. A waitress near the soda machine stepped back, lips pressed tight. "Steve, please," Denise said, soft but steady. "I helped someone last night. He was stuck in the storm. An old man. I couldn't just—" "You couldn't just what? Text? Call? Think for a second." His voice rose again. "Let me make it simple. I need employees who show up, not sob stories." Denise's heart pounded. 4 years she'd worked here, through holidays, double shifts, her mother's funeral. And this? "You're done," he said, pointing to the door. "Turn in your apron." She hesitated. For a moment she considered begging, but the room had gone too still. The customers who smiled at her every morning now stared like she was a stranger. She untied her apron, folded it slow, and placed it on the counter with trembling hands. She didn't cry. Wouldn't give him that. As she walked out, someone whispered behind her, "She's the only one here who ever remembers my name." The bell above the door jingled. Rain hit her face like punishment. She didn't even have an umbrella. Behind her, Steve straightened his tie. "Finally," he muttered. "One less charity case to worry about." What he didn't see, what no one saw, was the sleek black sedan parked just across the street. The tinted window lowered an inch. From inside, Henry Weston watched the whole thing unfold. The same note Denise had given him rested on the seat beside him. He didn't move, just watched. "So, this is where she works," he said quietly, jaw set. Then he drove off. And Steve Harlow had no idea that the man he'd just indirectly insulted was coming back, with questions, power, and a memory like steel. The rain had stopped, but the diner buzzed with storm energy. Sunshine poured through the front windows like it was trying too hard to pretend the world hadn't cracked just an hour earlier. The staff moved stiffly, whispering behind counters. No one mentioned Denise, but everyone felt her absence like a broken light bulb in a familiar room. Steve Harlow stood by the register, readjusting napkin holders for the 5th time. His tie was straight. His ego was louder. "Owner's coming any minute," he told the young cook, who barely nodded. "First impressions matter." At exactly 12:30, the front door chimed. Every head turned. A tall man stepped inside, silver hair, dark overcoat, polished shoes that clicked once against the tile. His presence was quiet, but somehow it made the entire room shift. People stood straighter. Eyes darted away. Steve's smile bloomed fast. "Mr. Weston," he said, hurrying forward, hands outstretched. "Welcome, sir. Place is spotless. Staff's tight. We're running smooth today." Weston didn't shake his hand. He scanned the diner slowly. His eyes passed over tables, booths, staff, then stopped at the far corner where Denise usually worked. "Where's the young woman who was here yesterday morning?" he asked, voice even. Steve blinked. "You mean Carter?" "Ah, had to let her go. Unreliable, always late, not really company image material." Weston stared at him. "Is that so?" he said. "Absolutely," Steve said, tone bright. "Didn't want you seeing any weak links." Weston turned to the cook. "Is that true?" The cook hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir. Denise was the best we had." The silence that followed cracked harder than any thunder. "You fired her this morning?" Weston asked. "Yes, sir, for cause," Steve answered quickly, still trying to smile. Weston nodded once, then said, "Call her back." Steve blinked. "Sir, I don't think—" "Now." The room fell to pins and needles. Steve's face drained of color, but he obeyed. 5 minutes later, the bell above the door jingled again. Denise stepped in, still wearing the same wrinkled uniform, confused and cautious. Every head turned, every voice hushed. Weston walked forward. "Miss Carter," he said, calm but warm. "You helped me when you didn't have to. You gave without knowing who I was. That means more to me than anything." A murmur rippled through the diner. Weston turned to everyone. Effective immediately, Denise Carter is reinstated as co-manager of this diner. Steve choked on air. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious," Weston said. "You wanted to impress me. Congratulations. You did it the wrong way." The room exploded, not with noise but with emotion. The cook clapped. A waitress wiped her eye. Denise just stood there, stunned. But behind her quiet expression, something strong had started to rise, and Steve had just become the cautionary tale in a story that was far from over. The days that followed felt surreal. Denise still hadn't fully absorbed what had happened. One moment, she was standing in the rain with no job and no hope. The next, she was co-managing the same diner that had turned its back on her, and yet, even with her name now etched beside Weston's on the office door, she moved with the same quiet focus. She cleaned tables, brewed coffee, took notes on inventory. Her leadership wasn't loud, it was respectful, efficient. Staff started arriving on time. Tips increased. Customers lingered longer. For the first time, the diner felt alive, but not everyone was happy. Steve Harlow worked the register now. Same pressed shirts, same fake smile, but something behind his eyes had shifted. It wasn't just bitterness, it was humiliation, and it festered. Denise caught him watching her more than once, not glaring, just observing, like he was waiting. One night, after closing, she stayed behind to balance the register. The numbers were off, only by $50. She checked again. Still off. Maybe a customer shorted a bill, she thought. Maybe someone made a mistake. But it happened again the next week. This time, it was $73. Denise's gut tightened. She recounted every slip, traced every transaction. No errors, no misprints. She didn't say anything, not yet, but the weight of it followed her home. She couldn't sleep, couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. When the drawer came up short a third time, she knew. This wasn't bad math. It was sabotage. She took the reports to Weston the next morning. "I double-checked everything," she said, voice low but certain. "Someone's taking money and trying to pin it on me." Weston leaned back in his chair. He studied her, then the numbers. "You think it's Harlow?" "I can't prove it, but it started right after I got promoted, and he's the only one who touches the drawer besides me." Weston nodded slowly. "Then we'll get proof." That evening, they installed 2 hidden cameras, one behind the counter, one above the register. Only Weston and Denise knew. The next few days passed in slow tension. Denise smiled through shifts, but her eyes scanned movements like a hawk. Steve barely spoke, but his glance lingered too long every time she keyed in the till. Then came Tuesday. Rain returned, tapping soft against the window panes. Denise left early to handle a supply run. Steve offered to cover the drawer. By closing, everything looked normal, until Weston checked the footage. The camera caught it all. Steve waiting until the diner emptied, opening her till, pulling out a stack of bills, replacing her count slip with a forged one. Then, with a smug little smile, whispering to himself, "Let's see you talk your way out of this." Weston didn't smile. He picked up the phone. Tomorrow would be Judgment Day. Morning arrived with a strange stillness. The diner opened like it always did. Coffee brewing, bacon sizzling, doors unlocking, but there was something in the air no one could name, a kind of hush that clung to every surface. Weston arrived before sunrise. He didn't say much, just asked everyone to gather near the counter at 9 a.m. sharp. By the time the hour struck, every employee was present. The cooks stood by the pass. Waitresses lined the side wall. Steve Harlow leaned casually against the register, arms folded, one foot resting on the baseboard like he was ready to yawn through another team. Update. Weston walked out of his office carrying a small laptop. A plain man in a gray coat followed behind him. Quiet, unassuming. No one recognized him. "This won't take long," Weston said. The laptop was placed on the counter and opened. A single video file waited on screen. "Denise," Weston nodded. She stepped forward without a word. Then he hit play. Silence wrapped the room as the footage rolled. There was Steve, clear as day, opening the register, sliding bills into his pocket, replacing the count slip. Every movement sharp, deliberate. And then the dagger, his smirk, his whisper. "Let's see you talk your way out of this." Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. A waitress covered her mouth. Steve lunged forward, voice cracking. "That's fake. She edited that." "Sit down," Weston said, cold and low. Steve froze. Weston turned to the man in the gray coat. Private investigator, independent footage, verified. Steve's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Weston continued, his voice rising just enough. This man framed the only person in this building who ever showed integrity, who helped a stranger when no one else would. He tried to ruin her name in my business, a place I built on trust. The front door opened again. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Steve backed up instinctively. "You can't be serious. This is insane." "You wanted attention," Weston said. "You're getting it." The officers cuffed him. Steve's protests turned into curses as he was walked out through the same door he once ruled. No one said a word. Weston looked at the staff, then back at Denise. "You handled this with more grace than most would. That kind of strength deserves more than applause. It deserves trust." Denise didn't smile. Not fully, but she nodded, eyes steady. "Some storms pass. Others just show you who never deserved shelter." The room breathed again. That afternoon, customers trickled in, completely unaware of the war that had just ended behind the counter. Denise tied her apron, reset the till, and returned to the floor like she always had. Only this time, no one saw her as just the waitress. They saw the woman who stood in the storm and never let it drown her. 2 weeks later, the diner felt different. Not because of new signs or changed menus, but because of energy. The silence was gone. Music played soft in the background. Laughter came easier. Denise didn't just manage shifts, she led them. One afternoon, Weston came in and sat at the counter. "Coffee, Mr. Weston?" Denise asked, smiling as she wiped down the laminate. "Just Henry, please," he said. They talked like old friends now. He'd become a frequent visitor, not to supervise, but to support, and to listen. "You never told me," he said, swirling cream into his cup. "Why'd you help me that night? In the rain?" Denise paused. Her smile faded into something quieter. "I know what it's like to be invisible," she said, "to be overlooked, judged before a word's spoken." She looked out the window where a little girl skipped past, hand in hand with her mother. "My own father used to call me a burden," she said. "Said I'd never make it past minimum wage. And when I got pregnant at 17, even my friends disappeared." Weston's brow furrowed gently, but he didn't speak. "I worked 3 jobs, cleaned houses during the day, waited tables at night, studied for nursing on weekends. But something always came up. My daughter got sick, tuition slipped out of reach, or rent ate what little I saved." She looked at him now, voice steady. "So when I saw an old man limping alone in the rain, I thought, what if that was my dad? Or me, 20 years from now? People forget kindness. I couldn't." Weston exhaled slowly, humbled. "Well," he said, "you're not invisible anymore?" That afternoon, he handed her an envelope. Inside was a full scholarship to the local university's night nursing program, tuition, books, and a letter of recommendation with his name on it. Denise stared at it, stunned. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept it," Weston replied, "and say you'll keep leading here until you're ready to wear that badge." That evening, she walked home under clear skies, the same street where weeks ago she had stood in rain with nothing but a soaked apron and faith. At home, her daughter was waiting by the door. "Mommy, you smell like syrup," the little girl squealed, hugging her legs. Denise laughed, holding her close. "One day," she whispered, "I'll tell you how a rainy night, a lost man, and a broken register changed everything." And in that quiet apartment, with tired hands and a full heart, Denise finally understood. Power doesn't always arrive in noise. Sometimes it shows up in silence, in storms, and in the people brave enough to stand still when everyone else runs away.